a mind escape. Are you ready?
Are you ready to escape your mind?
All right, folks, welcome back to Mind Escape. I am your host, Mike. It's been a little bit, it's been a few months. I apologize about that. Life comes up, had a quick vacation, work stuff, things pop up. But we're back in action here, and I am joined by friend of the show, Laura Tabone, who runs the Megalith Hunter channel on YouTube. Please go check that out. And you changed your name on Instagram. What's the name on Instagram now?
Mediterranean Mystique.
Mediterranean Mystique. I like that one too. I couldn't find you for a second on Instagram. I was like, what happened to, did she take her? And then I'm like, oh no, she just changed the name a little bit. But yeah, go check those out. If you're looking for Masters of Rhetoric, I have pulled it down from all the Mind Escape stuff because I'm just creating it as a separate entity. There is a Masters of Rhetoric YouTube channel that's separate now. There's also a Instagram page and a Twitter or X page. You can go check those out. And I will be uploading episodes bi-weekly. The first one's already up there. I kind of tweaked things a little bit as well. And again, the best way to support Mind Escape is just to click the LinkTree link, and we've got everything on there. So go check that out. But without further ado, welcome back on, Laura. How are you?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me back. I'm good, thank you. Also, haven't been doing too many videos lately, but I'm trying to make more effort now. I did change my Instagram name. The reason being, I've kind of ran out of megaliths to post. I wasn't traveling very much, and I'd pretty much been to all the ones where I live. So I thought, when I do travel, I take so many other pictures, like Roman sites, all sorts, medieval castles. And I thought, well, why don't I make it into more of a travel Instagram? So the focus of my YouTube is ancient history, but I tried to make my Instagram into more of a travel channel and focus mostly on the Mediterranean because I travel around the Mediterranean a lot. But so that's why I called it Mediterranean Mystique. I'm not sure it's working. The algorithm's not great at the minute, but that's the reason behind that change. So I can still be found there.
No, I like it. And like I said, I mean, things come up. I know you've got a little one now. I've got a little one. And, it's just life stuff happens. And between that and, towards the end, before I took a little bit of a break here, I did a cool episode with Sam Wolf on philosophy and psychedelics and things like that on his new book. But even previous to that, I was doing more just like critiquing other stuff, and I didn't like where that was going. I want to get back to just stuff I'm interested in and less focus on other people and what they're doing and things like that, because that's not really what Mind Escape was meant to be anyways. And I've said my piece on all that stuff. I know you kind of feel the same, all the drama of the alternative and fringe sciences and things like that. And it's fun. We'll continue to talk about some of this stuff, but at the same time, it's like, I think just the drama is just so played out. It doesn't get anybody anywhere, and it's just people making money pretty much.
Yeah, 100%. The rage bait culture online is kind of insane. And I think it's there in every kind of sector, let's say. So you have it in alternative history, but you have it everywhere. I remember years ago seeing, and I'm sure they still do this, but it was like some celebrity gossip thing. And they were like saying, bring the tea, let's talk about whatever this beauty blogger said. And then another beauty blogger weighed in on the other beauty blogger drama. And I thought, do people actually watch this? But then when I got into YouTube, I realized it's there in every sector. There's always drama.
Yeah, you got to bring the tea. If you want that money, you got to bring the tea. But we can change that, right?
And when people start these arguments, obviously the other side have to respond because they don't want to just get trashed online. So it turns into quite, yeah. And then there's the problem is there's never any resolution to it because when people get the views from the rage, they're going to keep raging and baiting, and so that they make money. So I do think it's a bit of a never-ending cycle. But it's not just
It's
for
just
celebrities,
exhausting.
it's
You know, like
it's in every sphere.
and everybody that I was critiquing's kind of got a little bit of a dose of karma without me even intervening at all anyway. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I can just watch it play out as opposed to participating in it if I need, that kind of a thing. But yeah,
Let's talk about real research. I mean, there's so
that's
much
right.
actually. The thing is, there's so many really interesting things so going on in the world. So if we leave Atlantis alone for a second, or whatever else is being chatted about online, the real research that's going on is always opening up really new, interesting chronologies. So one of the biggest stories to come out of the Maltese Islands, where I live, in the past couple of weeks, is they found a Mesolithic site. Now, Malta, up until then, was thought to have been inhabited firstly during the early Neolithic by farmers that traveled over from Sicily. These farmers stayed on the island for a while. Then there appears to have been a period where the islands were empty, called the fifth millennium hiatus. And then another wave of people came in, probably also from Sicily, judging by the appearance of the pottery. And they eventually became the megalith builders, the temple people, the people that built these enormous megalithic monuments on Malta, of which there were probably 100 originally. I mean, the traces of so many that have been found, and obviously several are still extant in pretty good condition for their age and are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So it's interesting because they're very unique in their appearance. And it would appear that it was people coming by sea from Sicily that developed this architecture. What we didn't have in the archaeological record were hunter-gatherers. There were a few people had put forward the idea before. They had suggested Neanderthals were here, but the evidence just really wasn't there. It did end up becoming a big one of the kind of online dramas, and there was a lot of people saying it was a conspiracy and a
It wasn't
cover-up.
that
But there was,
it was in Graham Hancock's show with the tooth or so, the
yeah,
Neanderthal
it
tooth,
was
is it?
the Neanderthal molars. That's
Yeah.
what those. So they found some molars in a cave, and for many reasons, it just didn't check out. Um, but nobody ever thought it was a weird suggestion per se. There's no reason to cover it up because there was a land bridge with Sicily at the time, in the Paleolithic, and there's every reason why there's lots of Paleolithic sites on Sicily, so there's no reason why hunter-gatherers wouldn't have made their way to Malta, but they didn't. They didn't at that time. There's no evidence for that in the Paleolithic, walking across the land bridge. But so there was the Neanderthal idea. There was also people saying that these cave paintings, there were some cave paintings in. So this cave used to be publicly accessible, but you couldn't go deep into it. The back part of it was cut off, and but there was rumors that there were cave paintings in it. Somebody did check it out at some point a long time ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago, and they did an analysis, and they were, I think, a scholar from Italy, and they said it does appear that they are hunter-gatherer paintings, but with no artifacts or any other information to go with it, it was hard to say. So recently, another investigation was carried out by another team of archaeologists, and they went to these this same cave. They traced the paintings that had been talked about previously, and they found that they are all modern, except for one, but it was too damaged to really say either way.
Like how modern?
So, like 100 years ago, just modern graffiti.
Gotcha.
So it was, yeah, so there was never any true evidence. And I have talked on my channel quite a bit about the Neanderthal controversy and the molars. And I mean, even if they were found, so there were the people that suggested that they were Neanderthal molars said that, okay, so it wasn't just about the appearance of the molar themselves
Weren't
and
they
some
under like
dating.
layers or connected to like a stalagmite or something like
Exactly. It
that?
was to
Yeah.
do with the layer as well. They were in a layer where Ice Age fauna were found. However, and obviously the Malta wasn't covered in ice during the Ice Age, but the sea levels were lower. It was connected to Sicily by a land bridge, so fauna did make its way here, even if humans didn't. So it would seem that these molars were in that layer. But this layer was 10 to 18,000 years ago. So that's still too modern for Neanderthals. So there's kind of a lot wrong with it. There's a lot wrong with the idea, and you need more evidence, right? So overall, the general consensus was hunter-gatherers did not come here in the Paleolithic, and that's still the general consensus. But a Mesolithic site has been found, and during the Mesolithic, the sea levels were the same as today. So this means that these hunter-gatherers came from Sicily via boat. And that's also a really big deal because that is thus far thought to be the longest Mediterranean journey hunter gatherers made. Because in other islands, they were closer to the mainland or to other islands, so they could island hop or whatever. Here, it would appear that to have been quite difficult to get here in a dugout canoe at that time. So we're talking like about 100 kilometers, and it would have meant traveling during the net day and traveling during the night. So they must have had some knowledge of navigation by the stars.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um,
Mm.
and as you mentioned too, for people that don't know, you did mention it, but you live on Malta. The first few episodes we had you on, we discussed a lot of the Maltese sites, uh, Gigantea. Uh, was it Menagera? Is that how you pronounce it?
Niger,
And Niger, yeah,
Hajar'im, Gigantea,
Hydraeum,
they're some
yeah.
of the biggest ones.
The hypogeum, the weird stuff with the hypogeum,
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff. Is there any like
yeah.
updates on? Because I know one of the first times we had you on, we discussed like rituals, and they think there might be some like ritual sites, and they don't know is it And I know you and I were tossing around the idea of possibly like entheogenic stuff happening. Has there been any breakthroughs on any of that, or have you found anything else on that?
No, I haven't read any research on that. I read one, literally a sentence in a paper that said because some of the ritual vessels were quite small, there's what were they for? If maybe it was a condiment, maybe it was some other substance that they could only take in small amounts. But without any archaeobotanical evidence for that, it's difficult to say. Maybe there has been some research since then, but there's nothing that I've come across on that.
Since it's become a more popular topic, I would think too that maybe there's somebody that would want to look into that and do like a chemical
Yeah.
analysis and just see what's kind of going on there.
I think the problem is, though, that a lot of the excavations where the vessels were unearthed, like I think late 1800s, early 1900s, when excavation techniques were not so great. So a lot of the Neolithic sites were pretty much emptied out at that point. And I don't know what sort of chemical traces they would still have in them anyway. It's much easier if they were to find a Neolithic site now and excavate it, and find some pottery or something that's
But yeah, I mean,
intact and has been buried the whole time.
if you have wheat too, you could get claviceps or ergot from that, and
Yeah.
then mushrooms grow everywhere too. That's a potential. I mean, actually, I don't know. Like, do you know? Is there any natural species of mushrooms or psychoactive mushrooms on Malta that you know of? Because it is kind of a dry climate
I'm
there.
not sure. I'm not sure, but there was a monograph written a few years ago So there were 3 monographs written as part of this project called the Fraxus Project, where a whole new set of excavations took place on Neolithic sites and settlements as well as temples. And the 3 monographs were temple places, temple landscape, and temple people. So temple people obviously was focused on skeletal remains from not the Hypogeum, but another, the Shara circle in Gozo, which was a stone circle on top, and then an underground burial monument. And temple places was about the temple sites, and then temple landscapes was about the environment. And it looked at the idea of, so what sort of plants and crops there were at the time, what sort of environmental degradation appears to have taken place that might explain why the temple people abandoned the islands or died out. Now, I would turn to that monograph to see if there's anything, because I wouldn't know what the names of those were. But if you do like a find and search in one of those documents, these are open access documents as PDFs, you might be able to find something. I don't know if they found any evidence for just simply those plants having grown at that time, which still doesn't mean, they're found with vessels or cooking materials or anything like that, but it would mean that when they went to these sites and they looked at the soil and soil cover and landscape. But I haven't really read that one. I was more interested in the temple places one, so I didn't really go deep on the environmental stuff. But we could have a look through that. That might be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I could look. I was gonna say I could use ChatGPT and just search to see if there's any white papers on whether they found anything that could be used in ritual or mind altering.
I mean, because why else would ritual, so small, tiny vessels found in a ritual context, we're talking, okay, so in Malta, they're referred to as temples, for want of a better word. We obviously don't know what took place in these buildings, but they're not domestic dwellings. And they're not all burial sites, so associated with funerary ceremonies. So,
And some of them are
it
weird,
would,
right? There's like holes that just like look into another room.
yeah,
Like what's
that's
going on there?
exactly. No one really knows. And they call this one hole the oracle hole because they say, well, maybe there was a priestess or priest talking through it to an audience outside or something, but it's really just guesswork. So they are considered to be ritual sites, even if we don't understand what rituals took place. And so when you find and you see them in the museum, there's a whole section of tiny, tiny vessels. What else could they have been used for? Mustard, maybe?
Mushroom
Some,
mustard, maybe.
some, I mean, we know that feasting took place in these places, so, but you expect vessels to be a lot bigger.
I mean, the other thing too is I don't think people think, and I've speculated about this with like Easter Island and stuff. There's psychoactive fish that eat coral, and then people eat the fish, and they get what's called fish inebriation. And I know Reunion Island has a culture of that, which Reunion Island's off the coast of Africa. But I know the Mediterranean, is it called porgy, or there's a fish that the Romans used to eat that had psychoactive properties as well.
No way.
Yeah.
I learn so much from you every time I come on here. That's brilliant. I had no idea.
But yeah, I mean, and there's in the Pacific Islands, there's called like the ghost fish or chief ghost or something like that. So there's all sorts of stuff that, it's not just fungi and flora and stuff like that. There's lots of things that have psychoactive properties. Like
What about, I'm sure I read somewhere there was like an animal that ate stuff that was psychoactive and then you could eat the animal. Was it like a goat or something? I don't know.
Well, I know. Oh, I mean, yeah, and there's stuff like that for sure. But dolphins eat pufferfish too. Pufferfish have some sort of I forget what it's called, but it's a type of a toxin that inebriates them or does something to them. You'll see videos, and I had a scientist on that wrote this book, but about like animal altered states and animals that use plants and fungi for altered states. And dolphins definitely do this thing where they'll pass around a pufferfish, and there's videos online of it and stuff like that, and they're definitely getting something out of it. So
I mean, I always think as well with the sleeping lady, the figurine that was found in the House Taplieni Hypogeum. I always wonder about her. Was she sleeping? Was she in a trance state? Was she, did she take something and then was supposed to go on a vision journey or something? I suppose it's all totally
Well,
possible.
and it's interesting too. So the fish inebriation, you go to bed and then have these like crazy dreams and nightmares and
Like when you eat cheese. Cheese gives me really weird dreams.
no, but there's an episode of Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia with Hamilton Morris where he goes to, like I said, Reunion Island, and they make him eat these fish heads, and then he has these like insane visions and dreams and stuff like that too. So maybe it's tied to that. I mean, who knows? It's pure speculation.
So
I'm
the
not saying,
Romans were having this fish.
yeah, porgy or
Ah,
porgy or it's like Porgy or
I
something
had
like
no
that.
idea. That's really interesting. Wow. So if you find those fish bones at a site, yeah, I
Yeah,
suppose.
it's like how they've been finding lizard tails in some of these vats. Like one, I think, outside of Vesuvia or what's it called? Um, where's Vesuvius again? I'm drawing a blank.
That's Pompeii.
Pompeii, yeah. So Pompeii, and then they found outside of Pompeii these vats with all these tropanes and psychoactive compounds from, you know, people, belladonna and all those are all like very brutal compounds, but like they've been speculating too that maybe these lizard tails might have psychoactive properties too, because we know about amphibians and again all these creatures. We talked about the toad, and I think last time you were on we talked about the Olmecs and some of the stuff you were looking into, the
Yeah,
toad
there was an interesting
iconography with
paper.
the, yeah. So yeah, I mean, who knows? There's lots to be found with all this kind of stuff. You just got to start
Mm.
looking into it. But has there been any other sites around, or any big discoveries? Because again, I haven't really been paying attention. Has there been any big discoveries around like the Mediterranean area lately?
I mean, I'm just trying to think I haven't really been talking much about the Mediterranean actually. I was talking about recently about a site in England that was quite interesting. It was so in the Neolithic, linear monuments were in fashion before circular monuments were. So linear monuments like Curzon monuments or rectangular enclosures, these giant earthworks, they were kind of in vogue before circular monuments like Stonehenge. So circular henges, stone circles, timber circles. And they've now found that they've done some new dating on a monument in Dorset, half of which was excavated a long time ago and has been turned into a road, I think, or something. And then the other half has been buried for future research. And they basically went to look at the samples that were kept in a museum and redated them and found that it's possibly the first circular monument of its kind and the largest in the whole of the British Isles, which means that that was the one that set the kind of the tradition, the pattern, the trend for the new circular monuments, which then was copied at Stonehenge.
And where
And
was
I thought
that?
that's quite Dorset, so in the south of England.
Because
And
I know
I just
I was gonna say, have you heard the speculation of the other way? So like, um, Skara Brae and up and like the Orkney Islands and up there, they found all those old Neolithic circles and stuff like that, and they thought it like maybe worked its way down. But you're saying that now they're speculating maybe it went up.
Yeah, it's so there was the research on the altar stone, which they're saying came from northern Scotland, so not Orkney, but northern Scotland. They found out it was from the Orcadian Basin, which is a geological formation that stretches from northern Scotland under the sea to Orkney. And but the rocks that were used for the Orkney monuments are not from the same exact part of that Orcadian Basin as the altar stone that was then transported down to Stonehenge. But it would appear there's a connection between all these people. So that's obviously quite interesting. But that was the Stonehenge stuff was all later than this circular monument. So yeah, I always thought that because people talk a lot about Orkney and how old they are, it was thought that they were probably the first circles, and then we know Grieveware pottery started there and then moved southwards and westwards. We know that the altar stone was carried down from there, the actual rock itself, and brought to Stonehenge at some point in Stonehenge's long evolution, because it obviously started off quite early, even in the Mesolithic, probably, with some timber poles, a timber alignment. So yeah, this is quite interesting to think that actually the first and largest circular monument was in the south, near enough Stonehenge in a way.
I mean, it would make sense from the standpoint of like climate or weather, right? Because it's warmer down there, and I can't imagine it
Yeah.
was any warmer up there when it was cooler, and like Orkney, it's pretty rough. I don't know if anybody's ever seen like the seas and stuff like up there. It's pretty brutal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's interesting. It, it's it's hard to say because a lot of sites are always thought to be on older sites anyway. They think that Stonehenge followed on from a Mesolithic timber alignment. Um, in Orkney, there's every possibility there was something there a little bit earlier. So, it's just a matter of finding it. And you're not going to dig up all the stone circles until you find some scarce artifact that's floating around that tells you there was something there earlier. It's hard if there was just like a really simple timber alignment and then it was removed and then that whole area was reused much more intensively over the next 1,000 years with lots of like post holes dug and lots of stones put up and lots of ritual artifacts dropped there. I suppose, and obviously I'm no expert and I'm an amateur looking at this from the outside, but I suppose it would be quite hard to preserve some of that Mesolithic stuff. What they found at Stonehenge isn't actually on the Stonehenge monument. The Mesolithic alignment is in what was at one point a car park nearby. So that's why they were able to find it. But I think sometimes monuments get reused so much you can't always find some of the really early stuff. But even I think it's in somewhere else in the northern England, or oh, gosh, I've forgotten. I did a video on this. They found another evidence of Mesolithic alignment, a timber Mesolithic alignment that they think may have been a lunar calendar, like a lunar solar calendar.
Yeah.
So
What's the
that
prevailing wisdom with like how does this so like we know the Neolithic peoples in that area, but like how does that connect? I know like Karnak has the stone, and then they've got all these different like alignments and just like primitive circles, and I think they're the Karnak's lines, right? So like
yeah,
how is that connected at all, or those are just a different people altogether?
they're earlier. I mean, they're earlier than the monuments in the British Isles and the ones along the whole Atlantic coast, Portugal, Spain, and France, are all much older. And yeah, once again, they're not really sure if there's a connection. I have read a paper where it's been suggested there was a connection and that a sort of megalith building culture moved west and then northwards. But then there's also been work done where the dates and the chronologies and the connections just don't seem to be there. So it's hard to say. It doesn't necessarily mean that the ideas didn't travel though. Even if the people didn't, there could have been some ideas
And
that traveled.
what about dolmens too? Like those, the two
Mm.
it's almost like a primitive lintel kind of a setup.
Yeah, they're just thought to be burial monuments.
So it's kind
I
of like how
mean,
like a mastaba evolved into an actual pyramid or structure or
yeah,
something. Okay.
yeah, exactly. And there's dolmens all over. I mean, there's so many. I suppose that can be an idea that is created independently by lots of different cultures, because it's literally, it's difficult to put them up, I suppose, but it's just three stones. Um, well, the simplest ones are just 3 stones. Obviously, there's much more sophisticated ones in Spain and whatnot, but um, there are usually skeletal remains found if they haven't been looted at some point in the past. And they make sense as funerary monuments, and sometimes they are astronomically aligned, which also makes sense in terms of like funerary ceremonies and worshipping the ancestors and carrying out rituals at them every year and adding new skeletons to them. I think I don't find dolmens that odd. I find monuments where there's no burials attached or very few burials attached can be a little bit strange. Um, but actually, this circular monument was associated with a mix of cremation and inhumation burials. So in the Neolithic, there was a gradual shift as well from inhumation to cremation. So it could be that all these monuments did have a funerary role to play in some respect, even if there wasn't like, so you might think, "Well, they found something like 4 burials there and it's a massive monument. Isn't that a bit big for that?" Um, but maybe it was some specific people that within the society. I mean, I don't know if the Neolithic is thought to be that stratified, but let's say potentially it was. Or maybe they, some of it got kind of damaged over time, because a lot of these, and I find this really interesting, a lot of stone circles and henges, and it's so difficult to get decent pictures because they're like in a housing estate. And they just happen to be digging in someone's garden and they find some traces of something, and then they have to like look at that whole site, and then they realize there was a massive circle there, and then they start looking in neighboring fields and they find other monuments. So I mean, there's obviously a lot of damage to them over time. There's no two ways about it. But that said, archaeologists are really good at finding things. I mean, it astonishes me when you watch Time Team and they're scraping away and oh yeah, we can see that this was whatever, and I just see loads of dirt, and they can tell all the different shades of dirt and soil patches. And in England, because a lot of the time we're talking timber or earthworks, they have to go a lot on crop marks from aerial photography and geophysics to be able to even work out what was there, or if anything was there. And then they start digging and sometimes find some artifacts, but sometimes they just find pits and trenches, but they've been robbed out at some point. So this I find, and like the ditches and the banks are not there, but they know that they were there originally and stuff. It's amazing what they can figure out, but in a really damaged monument. But still, when there's a lot of damage and reuse of a site, I'm sure some things we just can never know. I mean, even in Malta, because there's not much soil cover, in some areas they've excavated around a megalith that's been found, and they're like, okay, this is definitely a worked megalith. It must have belonged to a temple once. Let's start digging and see what we can find. And then when I read about it, they didn't find anything because it's been that much intensive farming in that area, and they've laid soil and plowed and whatever, and the anything that there would have been lying on the surface. So, or very with a very light soil cover. So it's all gone. So you don't
Interesting.
always get any
Yeah,
kind of
I was just
I
curious about the
you know
progression too. Like dolmen, if you go from like a dolmen to like Newgrange, like was the dolmen the precursor to like a Newgrange? You know what I'm saying? Or like the dolmen precursor to Stonehenge, or
But dolmens were in use from Neolithic all the way through to Bronze Age, so they were
so they were still in
contemporary with a lot of
use.
these larger
Okay,
monuments.
gotcha. And I know Newgrange is more of like a astronomical observatory. Like they know that there's alignments with the solstice and everything like that. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
interesting
and
stuff.
there was a burial associated with it.
Yeah.
At least one, wasn't there? And they could even trace from the DNA the connection between burials in that area, that they were all relatives of one another. So, I mean, they do some amazing work with DNA now as well. It's just mind blowing.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
wish I understood all that a bit better because it's so complex. But, I really enjoy learning about these connections with DNA, seeing whether a society was patrilinear or matrilinear. There's been some
S-
interesting work on that.
So on Malta, do they have dolmens? I know you have like lintel and like building structures that are similar, but are there any actual just dolmens on Malta?
Yeah, not many though. I mean, there's been I don't know how many have been recorded over the years, maybe 10 to 15 maximum. But how many actually remain? Probably about 6. So I visited one small cluster. I visited one that's on its own. Some others are on private farmland, so you can't get to them. And another one is on private land. I don't know if there's any others still extant, honestly. There's a little map in the museum of them, but they are thought to be Bronze Age because they were all empty apart from one. And this one called Tahamut, this one is like a cluster of them actually. They found Bronze Age artifacts there. So, and it was very similar in design to all the others. So the thought was that it was when the Bronze Age people came to Malta, they were building dolmens. And there's a big separation between the Temple people and the Bronze Age, the waves of Bronze Age migration, because the island was practically empty between these phases.
Yeah, we've discussed that on past
Yeah.
episodes. You mentioned
So
the period where there's like no building or anything, and the
yeah,
islands seem to be kind of empty, right? Or then you go
yeah,
back to like the earliest megaliths, and those, what are those, 5,000?
yeah, exactly. They're more
Yeah,
than 5,000 years on.
yeah,
So the dolmens are megalithic, but they're not connected to the temple culture at all. Not here anyway.
gotcha. Well, I mean, it's and so like the you've mentioned the farmland. Do you think that there's anything that could be of um interest on any of these people's farmlands? Like how much farmland is there and how much do you think is still yet to be
Yeah,
discovered, kind of a thing?
I always wonder this, and not that long ago, maybe 6, 7 years. I'm just reaching for numbers today, sorry, because I don't memorize everything in my head. Um, but there was this on Gozo. So there's this area called Tachench. It's this like plateau and these cliffs, and there are some dolmens there actually. Forgot about those. Um, well, one proper dolmen and the others are kind of like look like collapsed dolmens. But anyway, on that plateau, there is an unexcavated temple site. And it really is just a lot of rocks and modern rubble walls mingled in. It's quite hard to realize that it's a temple site, but it is, and it's never been excavated. But not too far away in the nearest village, a few years ago, somebody was building something in their garden and they must have needed planning permission for it because it was overseen by archaeologists. And they had a temple in their garden, like covered in vegetation, but only a few rocks were left. Now that to me is crazy because you wouldn't know. I mean, I've been to other sites that haven't been excavated, and where they're really heavy with vegetation, like the prickly pear trees and stuff, you can barely tell what it is. But I've read about it, so I've gone there and I've had a look, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that that's a worked megalith. So you can understand someone just had it in their garden, had no idea. And I just think that's crazy. I'd love to find that in my garden.
Yeah, that is great. It's like that movie on Netflix, where the woman's husband dies and she lets the guy excavate on his, and they find the Viking tombs there. I'm trying to think of the name. It's a famous British story of a woman whose husband goes away to war, he dies,
Oh,
and she allows them to excavate on her property. I'm drawing a blank right now.
I
Anyways,
can't think.
yeah, no, I mean it's a movie on Netflix. It's I want to say Ralph Fiennes is the guy that digs or something like that. Anyways, but yeah, there's probably lots of sites like that. I know.
I'm sure there
The
is.
interesting thing though is the uh the geology of that. I was watching Below Deck, oddly enough, with my wife, and they're in Malta for the season. It was like Below Deck Mediterranean. They were in Malta, and they like let the people that work on the ship like have a day off, and they went to the beach. But the beach wasn't a beach. It was all that like rustic rock that you see that are the megaliths are made out of. It's like that very coarse and sharp looking stuff. So like that, I find that very fascinating as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's it's all limestone, Upper Caroline, Caroline, and Globigerina limestone. Some of it, the Carolines, the really rough looking ones, lower and upper, it's very rough. And then Globigerina is like the smooth one, looks really sandy. But yeah, it's I always think so. Sometimes when the cultural heritage unit like produces an annual report, you go through it because I like to see what research they've done on the previous year. And sometimes they'll say they were doing an excavation before a construction project, and they came across something that they thought had been destroyed years ago, like a lost megalithic site and stuff. That's happened over the years as well. And then they make sure that it's preserved within the new development. But yeah, it just makes me wonder how much else is lost because you think it's quite there's not that many trees and it's this bare, small rock. But it's not that small in the sense that it would still take you a long time to walk from one end to the other. And there's still a lot of land that, is got a lot of vegetation on it that could be covering stuff. I mean, it could be. It would be hard to
Yeah, it
tell.
seems
You'd
like
have
it's
to
got a
search every inch.
similar geography or geology and all that stuff and sediment. It seems like it's very similar to Sicily. If I like based on looking, I've never been there, but just based on
Well,
looking at.
Sicily's actually a lot more mountainous. We only have a few small hills in Malta.
Okay.
Sicily's really mountainous, not just Etna. It's like a very mountainous country. But some of yeah, the geology is you see is similar. But the thing is Sicily is a lot older. I think Malta emerged from the sea like 22 million years ago or something, but Sicily was earlier than that. But Sicily was, at some point, I think it was three islands or something. And then Etna emerged from under the sea, and then it all became one island when it erupted the first
Yeah,
time.
I mean, I'd love to get over there. I still haven't been to. I'd love to go to Italy and Greece, maybe even check out Malta. My family's from Calabria, Italy, so I would love to. It's
That's so cool.
lower boot part of actually, and I didn't realize this, but that's where Pythagoras had his ascetic cult, was in Crotone, which is like pretty much where Calabria is now. So I'd like to go check out that area at some point.
Yeah, I haven't actually been across to Calabria. I would like to. I've been to Sicily many times. I've been to Italy many, many times, but all different parts. But I've never been to Calabria. And I keep saying that I want to go there. And there's a really good museum in Reggio Calabria that I want to go to, but just haven't managed it yet.
Well, I'm sure you'll get there. You travel, you get around
It's
there.
a
So
little bit easier for me to get there than you, so I really
yeah.
should make an effort. I could drive there.
But I keep talking about it. If the first place we go in Europe is definitely Italy, probably Greece too. I'd love to see Greece and
Oh yeah,
some of the
I
temples and
mean,
stuff.
I've been to Greece before a couple of times, but there's so much to see there. I mean, my list is so long.
And
I'm having trouble trying to
I'm not
work
even
out
like
where to
so set
start.
on like Athens per se. Like there's other places, like Naxos, the
Yeah.
Portara at Naxos. I'd love to see, and maybe Eleusis, and so.
Yeah, I'd
So
love
we,
to
we
go
have
to
a
Eleusis.
question. Scully asks, do the Knights of Malta do any weird Illuminati rituals at any of these megaliths? But I know that So what the Knights of Malta are a real thing there, and or what is that?
The
So that's
Knights of
similar to like
St. John.
yeah. So what are they similar to? Like
I think it's just a religious order
okay,
with historic roots. From yeah, the early modern period, I suppose,
but I
mostly
assume
in
you haven't
Malta.
seen any of these guys dressed up like that at any of these megaliths.
No, no. It's just lots of tourists with cameras. Unless they do some weird rituals in the middle of the night.
Maybe they
I
do.
don't hang
Maybe
around
they
at the
do.
temples or the Hypergeum in the middle of the night. So
Yeah. I would assume it's probably similar to what the Masons or some sort of Masonic.
I don't think it's that secret though. I mean, it's
No.
a religious order.
Oh, okay. So
I
is it
think they
part of
do a
like the
lot of
Catholic Church then?
charity work.
Is it part of the Catholic?
Yeah,
Oh, it is. Okay.
it's part of the Catholic Church, I think. I mean, I'm no expert. I think it has roots in that early modern period organization that came from Rhodes to Malta. Um, the funny thing is, though, I'll tell you one funny thing. I was in Rome once, I've been many times, and I wanted to just see something different. So I've been to all the sites that many times. So I Googled esoteric stuff to see in Rome, and I read about this keyhole. So I went on a little expedition to find this keyhole, and it's basically it's where the Knights of St. John headquarters is. And everybody says that when you go to the keyhole to their like sort of estate and you look through it, you have a direct line to the Vatican. And it's like right in the center of the keyhole, and it's really interesting. So I went there thinking this is really niche. Nobody's gonna be there. Oh my God, there's a queue all the way down the street. Like 100 people waiting to look through this keyhole. So I waited and I had a look, and you can see the Vatican, but I don't really know what's so esoteric about that because these are all religious orders and they're all in Rome, and you can see a lot of things from a lot of different places if you're on a hill. Rome is made up of
Maybe it's
hills.
like one of those like druid seer circle or seer stones or whatever, like something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe. But yeah, so I just got a little day out to look at that. People were even arriving in taxis to look through this keyhole.
I
It
always get
was
confused with, but the Knights of Malta, it's different. So the people that guard the Vatican, that's different. It's like what, Swiss Guard or Swiss?
That's the Swiss gods. They're the ones
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
colourful out,
yeah. Okay,
really colourful outfits. They're all
gotcha.
like, yeah. Um, Knights of St. John or Knights of Malta. I mean, listen, I'm no expert in this, but there's an interesting history, but it's relatively modern compared to what I tend to read about.
No, I want to look into it. I mean, I find that kind of stuff
Yeah.
interesting. Obviously, there's a reason why people ask these questions, whether
Mm.
there's some secretive nuggets in there or not. But I got to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were some esoteric associations with them. I suppose because they had a lot of money and controlled the islands for a long time, and still have, quite some properties. I mean, their estate in Rome is really nice with the keyhole. It's lovely. So, anywhere where you have religion and money, there's always also like an underlying esoteric association.
You're like, I'm here for the keyhole. The
So
person points. It's like the longest line ever. It's like, get to the back of the line.
I know, I couldn't believe it. When you just, oh, really? And I was thinking, well, if each person looks through it for 20 seconds, how long am I going to be waiting to see it? And then you see people, I've seen online Instagram pictures of this keyhole where people have actually put their phone up to the keyhole to get a good photo of it. I mean, that's quite people really committed to their Instagram feed. I mean,
See,
the
I'm
effort they
different.
go to.
Stuff like that. Like if I was there at like one of these sites, yeah, I'm sure I'd take a few pictures, but I wouldn't be like immersed on my phone while I'm there. I'd be like checking out the physical site that's
Yeah.
right in front of you.
I've
Yeah.
been to so many places. I mean, I've been to the Oracle of Delphi and I lost those pictures because they were on an iPad that died. And it's like, I don't know, I've never been that bothered because I always live much more in the moment than needing to record every second. I'm always enjoying myself too much. But now, because this has become somewhat my job in a sense with my YouTube channel, I have to make a lot more effort. So I do really do my best to get decent footage. But sometimes I get back to my hotel and I look and I'm like, that was rubbish. I made no effort today, but I did enjoy my day. So
No, I mean, look, all that stuff's cool. You know, definitely check it out. But it's yeah, it's like one of those things where you do want to live in the moment. You don't want to be like a prisoner to your phone or technology or whatever. And there's a reason why you're there to begin with, you know. So, I know you want to wrap it up here in the next 10 minutes. I'm just trying to think if there's anything we haven't covered.
I don't want to, but I have to.
I have
I
to
could
too.
talk all night. You know
I
how
know, I
I
know, I
am.
know. I'll have you back on again soon, and we'll catch up on some other stuff. But um,
Yeah, I'm going to look up some of the things we talked about. And now we've given Scully the Hypno School, he's going to be Googling the keyhole
there you
in
go.
Rome.
Um, yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything I wanted to ask you that I didn't. But like I said, we'll have you back on again soon. And yeah, I mean, I think is in terms of all this stuff, you know, it's hard. As I mentioned, like you get caught up if you know with all the other noise of what other people are doing sometimes, and you kind of get lost on your own. You get sidetracked or sent on a tangent from your own quest, and you know, I'm just trying to get back on course with my own stuff and let all that other noise just work itself out. Like as I mentioned, it was, you know, the last few months just watching all the tea, as we called it earlier, all the drama just kind of like play out. I saw people get doses of their own karma and things like that. So it's just like I've come to realize I don't need to involve myself in that. And if I want to take a look and see what's going on, I'll catch a laugh here and there or whatever. But yeah, that's not, you know, I'm not an archaeologist. That's not my job. And I'm also not against that. So it's like, you know, I think you and I are probably somewhat in the middle. Like we're open-minded, but we're also like, you know, I've been trying to use philosophy, epistemology, theory of knowledge. How do we know what we know? Where is your information coming from? If it's just coming from
Exactly.
a YouTube video, like you have a lot more work to do. You should be reading books on the subject. Stuff you don't even, it's like stuff you don't like I read stuff all the time where it's like, I know this is going to debunk some of the more fantastical ideas I have, but I have to look at it. Like you can't really be objective if you're not looking at everything, right? So,
Exactly.
you know,
And I think as well, you find like sometimes books are written where really good sources are used, and then really with a mix of just rubbish sources that, you know, are literally just someone's pulled an idea out of their head and planted it on paper and then it's being used as a source. That's obviously not a rigid piece of research, obviously, and no one can argue that. No one can say that's a rigid piece of research, and yet they will. They will sit and say that that's a rigid piece of research, and that they've pulled all these amazing sources together when they haven't. So it's you can make something look um, robust without it actually being robust. It requires people to sit there and sieve through the evidence. And what I like as amateurs is that we can take an interdisciplinary approach and we can pull information from different areas. So if someone says to me, what do you think about this site in Italy, for example? Do you think it was really this, that, or the other? Well, I'll have a look. I'll tell you what I think. So like there's this natural rock formation in Sicily that some people think is a megalithic stone circle that's astronomically aligned. And I mean, it really doesn't take long to find out that it's highly unlikely because there's no artifacts found at the site. The rocks don't look worked. There's no tool marks. I mean, the astronomical alignments are quite rough and coincidental. You know what I mean? It doesn't take much, and you could, find some papers on that area and what sort of cultures and civilization or whatever has been found there over the years. And you can probably find it wasn't even inhabited until the medieval period by farmers. So you pull all that information together and then you tell people what you think, and they say, "Ah, big cover up." I mean, if you think it's a big cover
Yeah,
up,
the
then
the cover up,
I
the
can't give me the evidence. Don't just keep saying that, because then
the
you,
cover up stuff is
I can,
for the ancient stuff's very bizarre to me, because it's like, what would these archaeologists have to gain? If anything, it would make them famous if they found something insane. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like, that would be the carte blanche for any sort of researcher that's researching this stuff, so I don't understand that from like a logic standpoint. I understand
yeah,
there's real conspiracies from time to time. I understand that political things get weird but we're talking about like rocks in the ground that have,
yeah.
were part of society at the time or whatever. So I don't know. I try and just apply epistemology. How do we know what we know? Theory of knowledge. Where is this information coming from? If you're going to have a debate with me and your best source is somebody talking on YouTube, which is what we're doing now, I wouldn't have somebody take what I'm saying and be like, "See, he's the end all be all," or "See, Laura's the end
No.
all be all." No, you read the
My
scientific
dates.
papers. Yeah, you can look at the mysterious stuff too. Nobody's saying don't look at the mysterious stuff, but don't pretend like that's the end all be all
Yeah.
solution answer to everything, because
You've got
you
to take a proper approach. I
yeah. And
mean,
if you want to believe something, then just accept that you're just believing something too. You don't
it's
have to debate
just,
other people
yeah,
about it. Just be like, "Oh,
it's
this
a
is
religion to you.
yeah,
But when you
that's
start to do fringe stuff and energies, there's really no proving it. So then you may as well just say, this is quite unique to my kind of worldview,
well, then we talk about
and I'm just going to
telos,
stick to it.
teleology, and why, right? So it's like
Mm.
you can have science is really good at describing how things work, but it's not good at describing why. And I think the big thing people want to look at is why. But why might be a human invention. Why might be, what the ancient Greeks were fighting about, teleology back in the day and everything like that. So it all comes back full circle. But at the end of the day, we all just got to do our best. And if you want to have a dialogue or dialectic, you should. But just be respectful, be civil, be mindful, and that's, I guess, my advice with these topics.
I also think everyone goes a bit too broad. I think you have to take one subject, like for example, this monument in Sicily. And if I pull out all the data on that site, all of it, and I tell you it's not a site, it's a natural formation, then you give me all your data, and then we see what we've got. But it never goes like that. We know it doesn't go like that. It goes around in these rhetoric drama circle. It's just who shouts the loudest and is the most dramatic, and that's the problem, I think.
Or who paid for the
Um,
most bots and trolls online, kind of a thing.
yeah, I really think so.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that would be the simplest approach. Is okay, I have an open mind. Maybe it is an astronomically aligned stone circle like Stonehenge. Let's have a look. But if I pull out all the data and there's just not one piece of data, and then you're going to say, because the information got lost, or they didn't dig deep enough, or they're covering it up, whoever they are. I mean, there's thousands of archaeologists,
The
heritage,
aliens, Laura.
cultural heritage units. I mean, that would be a lot of people that have to be covering it up. I
Dude, the
mean, they look,
aliens came down, they pulled out the Men in Black device, they erased our minds, and then they went
that can be
back.
the only way that they've got
Yeah,
the control over thousands of archaeologists
that's what
and
they
other
did.
disciplines
They did it.
worldwide. I mean,
And look,
it's insane.
I've been critical of both sides. Early on in the
Mm,
podcast, I was very critical of dogmatic academics, and I'm being critical of dogmatic alternative thinkers. It goes
mm.
both ways. So I mean, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do, and be honest with yourself, be honest with other people, and that's what it is. So
Yeah, exactly. No, I completely agree. And I think this stuff that you're doing on epistemology is really interesting. It gets me thinking in this modern age, how can we pull the fact out of the sea of information that's out there, and what do we really consider to be fact? But what I do like in peer-reviewed journals and stuff is they always have a lot of, as I call it, caveats. They always say, we think this, but this, and this could happen, and then that would change this. This is only an estimated date range. They put tons of caveats in it that even when you're summarizing it for a video, it's hard to summarize because you want to summarize it in a succinct way, but you also want to do it justice and include the caveats that particular group of scholars are mentioning. But so that makes me think, they're not that dogmatic because they always say there's room for maneuver with this, that, and the other. But it also depends on the area that we're looking at.
Well said. Let's wrap it up here. Yeah, I think that we'll have you back on again, like I said, sometime in the near future. We can talk about all that ritual stuff and entheogens and possible finds on some of these islands. And yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to these sites.
I'll do some research and I'll see not just Malta, but generally in the Mediterranean, if anything interesting is being found, like even Sardinia and stuff like that.
Sounds good. All right, everybody. Well, yeah, Mike. Go check out Laura's channel, which is Megalith Hunter, and your Instagram channels. What is it? Mediterranean Mystique. All right. So go check those out. And yeah, I mean, if you want to support Mindscape, the best way to do it is click on the LinkTree link down below. And yeah, we got tons of stuff on there. As I mentioned before, I separated Masters of Rhetoric, so it'll just be a separate philosophy podcast, separate from all this stuff. So you can go check that out if you want. And I'll be uploading episodes weekly, and then probably bi-weekly once I get to like 6 or 7. So, but I want to thank everybody, and it's good to be back on here after a small hiatus. And yeah, look for more episodes coming up. And yeah, thank you so much, Laura, again for coming on and sharing your takes and your research. And that's about it. We love everybody. Stay safe out there, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.